What I'd like to do in the interview today is just stick to the issues that you're going to be confronted with should you become our United States Senator. I'm confident that there's always something going on with the Attorney General, so we'll go right to the United States Senate. And the first area that I'd like to talk to you about, Dick, is the area that everybody is talking about, and essentially it's jobs and the economy. So why don't you give us a brief, because there's 5 or 6 major areas I'd like to cover with you. Why don't you give us a brief view of what you see as the job situation, unemployment situation, and what you personally intend to try to do about it if and when you get there?
Well, very good question, Jim. And as I go around the state of Connecticut, you know, I do a lot of traveling around the state.
I know you do.
As you'll recall from our many conversations over the years, there are very few nooks and crannies that I haven't seen, and I listen to people. So I've been listening to people in the state of Connecticut, and you know the joke about Dick Blumenthal that if there's a garage door opening, Blumenthal will be there.
It's good to have a sense of humor.
Gotta have a sense of humor.
Gotta have a sense of humor.
But what I'm hearing people say is that they're struggling. You know, they're struggling economically to stay in their homes, to find jobs, and the economy is front and center of what concerns them. But they also tell me that there simply aren't enough people in Washington, D.C. standing up for them and fighting for them, standing up against the special interests that are receiving all kinds of tax breaks and giveaways and hidden subsidies, you know, $200 billion to the pharmaceutical companies through the bar negotiations for Medicare, $40 billion to the big energy companies through the tax breaks and loopholes they receive. Tax breaks for companies that send jobs overseas, believe it or not, and waste and fraud in government. I know about fighting those kinds of giveaways and tax breaks that people regard as unfair. And the bailout, which benefited the big investment banks on Wall Street. TARP. I opposed it.
You did oppose TARP.
I opposed it.
Which was followed, Dick, by stimulus, another $800 billion.
Which I also opposed.
Which you opposed, and it's a good side to be on, because after spending $800 billion where the representation was perhaps we wouldn't get any higher than 8% unemployment, we're sitting close to 10%, and the prognosis isn't looking good, Dick. So, I mean, I understand what you're saying about the, for want of a better word, the smaller guy, saying, you know what, the big boys, they get all this tax break action. How about some of those billions of dollars coming our way? And I know...
And that's my point, Jim. We bailed out those big investment banks. What have we done for small business?
Well, let's talk...
Small business is the engine of economic growth and job creation in this country, and I have a plan to aid small business. First of all, tax credits for new hires, payroll tax exemption for new hires, not what the President has proposed, not the Obama administration proposals, because those are limited to this year. I say enlarge and extend them because businesses want certainty. They want to be able to plan. Second, we need to make more credit and loans available. Small businesses tell me, and I've gone around the state, I've talked to Crescent Manufacturing in Burlington, to companies in New Britain, in Waterbury, throughout the state of Connecticut. They need more credit.
Yeah, they're starved for cash, too.
Exactly.
They're starved for cash.
So we need direct loans from the SBA, consortia of banks put together by the federal government to provide those loans and make credit easier. And I'll tell you something else I'm hearing, Jim, and that is that our trade policies work against our small businesses. And I'll give you one example. Last April, I called on the Secretary of the Treasury,
Tim Geithner?
Tim Geithner, wrote to him and asked that he declare China a currency manipulator because it undervalues its currency, which is a, as you well know, a subsidy to their exports and a barrier to our exports to China. And I worked with Steve Wilson, who has a company here in Burlington known as Crescent Manufacturing. He put me in touch with many other businesses around the state of Connecticut who have exactly the same complaint, that our government is actually failing to use all of the tools it should to encourage and force China to raise the value of its currency. Now, it's floating it, but it still has had no really effective result. And I think we need to have fair trade policies and declare China a currency manipulator and take stronger measures against China.
Okay, those are some specific actions for that. And also, I think it's good to get on the record, because I don't know how many people know it, about your opposition to TARP, opposition to stimulus, although they've just come back with another stimulus plan. Would it be a fair representation to say, and I know it's hypothetical, Dick, I know it's hypothetical, that given your feeling about TARP and stimulus one, and now we've had son of stimulus, that if they come back again and want to throw more money at the circumstances, and I know it's a hypothetical, would your tendency to be to vote against throwing more money at it in the form of stimulus?
I would vote against, Jim, any plan similar to the bailouts, which was excessive in size, inadequately supervised, and poorly designed.
Okay, let's move on to health care.
But let me say one other thing. You know, what we really should be doing is building roads, schools.
Infrastructure.
Infrastructure is a multi-syllable word that applies to projects that improve our roads, our schools, our transmission lines to lower electricity costs. One of the biggest impediments to small business is our electricity costs. We're the highest in the continental United States. I have fought them, but better transmission lines have to be built. That's part of infrastructure. So we can put money in people's pockets to stimulate consumer demand, paychecks to people, that will result in greater economic demand and help us surmount the problems that we have right now.
Let's move on to health care, Dick. I have a couple of quotes here. I wanted to mark them down. And we'll do it. Remember when Johnny Carson, Dick, used to do Karnak? And he'd throw out some lines, you'd have to guess what he was thinking of. Here's some lines. We have to pass it to find out what's in it. I don't know what's in it, but I know that I'm going to vote for it. And last, once they read it, they'll love it. It's almost like let them eat cake. And of course, these are the quotes of Ms. Pelosi and Mr. Breed, right?
You're sure you got those right, Jim?
Well, I'm absolutely sure, Dick.
But I'm not challenging you.
No, I understand. But there's some talk about, and it's a big, big subject, but there is some talk about repeal in some quarters. There's some talk about tweaking the thing in other quarters, and there are other quarters about leaving it alone. I mean, it's over 2,000 pages, and you know what? One of the headlines said, dissecting details of new health care law, many Americans in the dark. Now, there's a surprise, Dick, right? And the other one says, think health care reform will cut costs, think again. So, very briefly, because it's a big area, do you have any initial predisposition to what you're going to be doing when it comes to health care?
I do.
Okay.
Very simply, it's a first step. It's a very deficient step in some areas, like cost cutting. We need to cut waste and fraud. I know about cutting waste and fraud. I've fought it. I've recovered literally millions, billions of dollars probably over the period of time for taxpayers as a result of overcharging by the pharmaceutical drug companies. This law actually contains a ban, which I opposed. It's a ban supported by both Republicans and Democrats, including this administration, that forbids negotiating with the pharmaceutical drug companies. That's $200 billion out of our pockets as taxpayers on Medicare. We need to cut those costs. We need to go after the sweetheart deals. And so we need to do more about cost cutting. There are some good ideas. You know, I approach the healthcare issue from a very personal standpoint. Part of what I've done, and you and I have talked about it over the years, is to go to bat for people who are denied health insurance coverage by the health insurance companies when they sometimes need literally life-saving medical treatment that is desperately necessary. And we advocate for them. We get results. 95% of the time we win for those people. The health insurers use excuses, pre-existing conditions, the doctor's out of network, the treatment is experimental. This bill helps to address those abuses, and I support
That portion of
that
it.
portion. But we need to cut costs, and we cannot tolerate, as a country, the spiraling increases in healthcare expenses that we see. And we need to do more to help small businesses, also very, very important.